"Use me, just don't let me die," she begged, until the Lakota warrior made her his wife. The cold wind cut sharply across the frozen plains, carrying with it the bitter scent of snow and pine. Every step she took was a struggle, her boots sinking slightly into the icy ground. Her body ached, every muscle screaming from the long journey she hadn't planned but had been forced into. She had wandered far from the small village she once called home, following a desperate hope that she could find safety, or at least a moment of warmth and shelter. But now, lost and shivering, she realized the vastness of the world outside her small, familiar life. The sun had dipped low, casting a pale orange glow over the horizon. But the light did nothing to ease the chill in her bones. Her fingers were numb, her cheeks stung with the sharp bite of winter air, and she stumbled on a hidden rock, almost falling face first into the snow. Pain shot through her ankle, and she collapsed to her knees, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Panic rose in her chest, fast and choking. She realized that night was approaching, and with it came the real danger of being alone in the wilderness. The trees ahead were dark silhouettes against the fading light, their branches clawing at the sky. Somewhere beyond them, she hoped, there might be people, perhaps warmth, perhaps safety. Her heart thumped wildly as she tried to rise, but the cold and exhaustion pulled her down again. "Please, just help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible, lost in the wind. For what felt like an eternity, she crawled slowly forward, leaving weak trails in the snow. Every few steps she would stop, pressing her hands against the frozen ground to catch her balance. Her lips trembled, and she could feel tears freezing on her cheeks. She had no weapon, no food, and little hope. All she could do was keep moving. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of survival kept her pushing forward, even as her body begged her to stop. Suddenly, movement caught her eye. A figure was approaching from the shadows of the trees. At first, she thought it was a trick of her imagination, a mirage caused by fatigue and cold. But as it drew closer, she saw the outline of a man, tall and steady, moving with a deliberate calm that contrasted sharply with her panic. He wore the clothing of a warrior, furs layered over leather, a hint of a traditional pattern embroidered along the edges. His face was partially shadowed by a hood, but his eyes shone sharply, observing her carefully. She froze, fear and hope colliding inside her. Was he friend or foe? She had no way to know. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She wanted to call for help, but the words seemed trapped in her throat. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might burst. The man stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady and calm. There was no rush, no sudden aggression. He crouched slightly as if to show he meant no harm. Then, slowly, he spoke, his voice deep but gentle. She didn't understand his words, but the tone was soft, reassuring, carrying the kind of authority that made her believe she was safe. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she whispered again, barely louder than a breath, "Please, just don't let me die." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a careful step closer, then another, until he was close enough that she could see the details of his face. His skin was warm brown against the cold landscape, and his eyes held a kindness that eased a fraction of her terror. Something in his presence made her feel that she could trust him, even if she had no reason to yet. Summoning every ounce of courage, she extended a trembling hand, not knowing if it would be accepted. The warrior paused, then slowly reached out and grasped her hand firmly but gently. The contact sent a small wave of relief through her, a reminder that she was not alone anymore. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her trust, then gestured toward the trees and the faint trail that led deeper into the camp. With effort, she managed to rise to her feet, leaning heavily on him. Each step was a challenge, but his steady presence gave her courage. He guided her carefully, moving slowly so she could keep up, his hand resting lightly on her elbow whenever the terrain became slippery. She could barely speak, but she murmured fragments of thanks, her words broken and muffled by the cold. He simply nodded, continuing to lead her with patience and determination. As they walked, the sounds of the camp became faintly audible. The crackle of fire, the soft voices of people speaking in a language she didn't know. the occasional laughter that felt distant and foreign. The warmth of human life, however faint, was a comfort. She had spent so long alone that even the smallest sign of company brought hope. Eventually they arrived at a small clearing where a fire burned, surrounded by a few simple structures. The warrior led her close to the fire and helped her sit on a log. She shivered violently, unable to stop, and he quickly removed a thick fur from his own back, wrapping it around her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, seeping into her frozen body, and she finally allowed herself to take a deep, shuddering breath. He didn't say much, but his eyes scanned her carefully, noticing the bruises on her arms, the cuts on her hands, the way she shivered despite the fire. He gestured toward a bowl of warm liquid, and she understood that it was food or drink. Her hands trembled as she took it, grateful beyond words. The warmth of it against her throat and stomach was almost too much to believe. She hadn't realized how hungry she had been, how much her body had longed for care and nourishment. Over the next hour, she drank and ate in small sips and bites, while the warrior watched attentively. Every so often he made gestures, speaking in his own language, and she responded in broken fragments of hers. It was clumsy, yet somehow, in the mix of sounds, they understood each other. The connection was not complete, but it was enough. Enough to know she was safe. Enough to know she was not alone. As night fell fully and the stars appeared in the clear winter sky, she leaned back against the warmth of the fire, wrapped in the fur. Her eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The warrior remained nearby, his posture protective, his eyes alert to the surrounding darkness. Though she could barely speak, she whispered one last plea before drifting into a restless sleep. "Please, just don't let me die." He stayed until he was sure she was safe, then gently moved away, keeping a careful watch over her. The wind continued to howl outside, and the snow drifted silently across the plain. But inside the small clearing there was warmth, there was care, and for the first time in days, there was hope. Through the long night she dreamed of safety, of warmth, of being protected by someone who had no obligation to help her but did anyway. And as she slept, the warrior remained close, a silent guardian in the shadows, ready to face any danger that might come near. By morning she would wake to a new world, a world where she had survived and where a stranger's kindness had given her a chance at life. And in that fragile moment, the first threads of trust were woven between them, threads that would grow stronger with every shared step, every small act of care, and every quiet moment that followed. The morning sun rose slowly over the snowy plains, its pale light casting long shadows across the camp. The woman woke to the warmth of the fur wrapped around her and the gentle crackle of the fire nearby. For a moment she felt disoriented, her mind foggy from exhaustion. But then she remembered where she was, and who had brought her here. A wave of gratitude and relief washed over her. She had survived the night. She was alive. The warrior sat a short distance away, sharpening a small knife with careful, deliberate motions. When he noticed her stirring, he gave a small nod, an acknowledgement that made her feel seen and safe. She took a deep breath and swung her legs over the edge of the log, testing her strength. Her muscles ached, but she was stronger than she had been yesterday. The warmth of the fire helped her bones regain some life, and she slowly straightened, brushing snow from her boots. The warrior gestured toward the center of the camp. She noticed several other members of the community, men, women, and children, going about their morning tasks. There was a quiet rhythm to their movements, a sense of order and purpose. Some carried baskets of food, others tended to small fires, and a few prepared animals for the day's work. Though the woman could not understand the language, she observed the way people communicated without words, through gestures, expressions, and shared understanding. The warrior approached her, holding a small bowl of warm broth. She accepted it carefully, grateful for every drop. The taste was simple but comforting, nourishing her body and soothing her throat. She sipped slowly, mindful of her hunger and the way the warm liquid spread through her chest. He nodded slightly as she drank, then made a motion toward the snow-covered ground, as if asking her to follow him. With cautious steps she moved beside him, He guided her to a sheltered area where some of the community's women were working on repairs to clothing and blankets. One of them looked up, curious but calm. She made a small gesture, a wave of the hand, and smiled kindly. Though the woman could not understand the words, she felt welcomed. There was no judgment in their eyes, only quiet interest. Over the next several days, the warrior stayed close, ensuring the woman had what she needed to recover. She learned how to collect firewood safely, how to carry water without spilling it, and how to move through the camp without disrupting the daily routines. The warrior rarely spoke in a way she could understand, but his gestures, patient looks, and occasional nods guided her. Slowly, she began to understand a few of his words, repeating them to herself until she could remember their meaning. One afternoon, while the sun shone weakly through a thin layer of clouds, the woman tripped over a hidden root. She fell hard, twisting her ankle slightly. Pain shot through her, and she cried out instinctively. The warrior was immediately at her side, steadying her and examining the injury. He spoke softly, his tone calm, conveying reassurance even though she could not understand the language. Gently, he helped her sit, then used a piece of cloth to wrap her ankle. The care and attention he gave her made her feel a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. As she rested, she observed the way he moved through the camp. He was methodical but gentle, carrying himself with confidence but never arrogance. His interactions with others were respectful and measured, a balance of authority and compassion. She realized that he had earned the trust of his community through his actions, not his words. Watching him, she felt a deep admiration beginning to grow, mixed with gratitude for the protection he had offered her. At night, as the stars emerged over the frozen plains, the woman sat quietly by the fire, wrapped in a thick blanket. The warrior sat nearby, occasionally tending the flames or checking the perimeter of the camp. She thought about her life before the wilderness, about the fear and uncertainty she had faced, and about the man who had saved her. She realized how fragile her survival had been and how the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of a life. Days turned into a week, and her strength returned fully. She could walk without leaning on the warrior, though she often chose to stay close to him, drawn by the quiet reassurance of his presence. The warrior began to include her in small tasks around the camp, gathering herbs, carrying water, helping with simple repairs. At first, she felt clumsy and out of place, but he guided her patiently, correcting gently when necessary. The way he treated her made her feel capable, respected, and valued. During this time, they began to communicate in small ways beyond words. A gesture here, a nod there, a shared look across the fire. Sometimes she would laugh softly at something he did, and he would respond with a rare smile. But the simplicity of these moments, the warmth of the fire, the shared work, the quiet companionship, created a bond that went beyond language. She began to realize that trust and understanding could grow in silence as much as in conversation. One evening, the warrior brought her to a small clearing outside the camp. He pointed to the horizon, then to her, then to the trees beyond. He understood that he was showing her the land, helping her feel the environment rather than fear it. They walked slowly, side by side, over the soft snow. She noticed the care he took to avoid dangerous spots, the way he adjusted his pace to match hers. The gesture spoke volumes. He was patient, attentive, and protective, but he did not treat her as fragile. As they returned to the camp, the woman noticed small signs of change in herself. She was no longer trembling at every shadow. She could move with more confidence and independence. Her gratitude had evolved into admiration, and in quiet moments she realized that she was beginning to care for the warrior in ways she had not expected. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also given her dignity, respect, and a sense of belonging that she had not felt in years. The warrior seemed to recognize this shift, though he did not speak of it. He continued to offer guidance and protection, but he also allowed her space to grow. Their interactions were subtle yet meaningful. A gentle touch to steady her when she stumbled, a shared smile across a busy camp, a nod of acknowledgement when she completed a task successfully. These small moments built trust and respect, layer upon layer. One particularly cold evening, a strong wind swept across the plains. Snow drifted against the camp's outer barriers, and the temperature dropped sharply. The woman shivered as she sat by the fire, pulling the fur tightly around her shoulders. The warrior noticed immediately and removed his own heavier layer, draping it around her. She protested weakly, but he shook his head, insisting without words. The warmth was immediate, and she felt a deep sense of safety and care. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to relax completely, to let go of fear, and simply exist in the present moment. Over the days that followed, the woman began to understand more about the warrior's life and values. She observed the respect he had from others, the quiet authority he carried, and the way he balanced strength with compassion. She also learned small pieces of his language, repeating words and phrases, practicing pronunciation until she could communicate simple needs and responses. The process was slow, but each successful exchange strengthened their connection. Through shared tasks, quiet walks, and moments of mutual understanding, the woman began to see the warrior not just as a savior, but as a man with depth, history, and integrity. He was patient and attentive, but also proud and capable. The more time she spent with him, the more she realized how rare it was to find someone who could inspire both trust and admiration. And in the quiet evenings by the firelight, she found herself thinking about him in ways she could not fully explain. A growing sense of connection that went beyond gratitude. By the end of the week, she was walking confidently through the camp, helping with daily tasks and engaging with others in small ways. The community accepted her gradually, encouraged by the warrior's trust and support. She felt a sense of belonging that she had not known for years. And through it all, the bond between her and the warrior continued to deepen, not through words, but through shared experiences, mutual care, and the unspoken understanding that they had both found something important in each other. As night fell once again over the snow-covered plains, the woman sat near the fire, wrapped in layers of fur. She watched the stars twinkle above, feeling a mix of gratitude, admiration, and quiet affection. She had survived the wilderness, found safety, and discovered the first sparks of trust and connection with the man who had saved her life. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that for the first time in a long while she was not alone. She was seen, protected, and valued, and that knowledge, simple as it was, filled her with a warmth that no fire could match. The days passed slowly, but the bond between the woman and the Lakota warrior grew stronger with each shared moment. By now, she had learned the rhythm of the camp, understanding when to gather water, when to help with fires, and when to step back to allow others to work. She moved with more confidence, her steps steadier, her fear replaced by cautious determination. The warrior watched her closely, but he allowed her independence, stepping in only when needed. In the quiet way of their lives, a deep trust was forming, built on respect, care, and the shared experience of survival. One morning, a distant cry rang across the plains. The woman's heart jumped, and she looked to the warrior, whose expression remained calm but alert. Without a word, he moved toward the sound, signaling for her to stay behind. She hesitated, but she trusted him. His steady presence had become a lifeline, a reminder that she could survive because he was near. Watching him move with purposeful speed and awareness, she realized that he was not just strong, but also deeply connected to his land and people. Every motion carried intention, every glance carried meaning. When he returned, a small group of travelers had approached, seeking temporary shelter and supplies. The warrior greeted them with calm authority, ensuring the camp remained safe while providing aid. The woman observed quietly, noticing the way he balanced caution and kindness, commanding respect without force. She admired the way he spoke, even when she could not understand the words, the gestures, the tone, the careful attention. Everything conveyed leadership. She realized that true strength was not about showing power, but about protecting others while maintaining fairness and integrity. Later, the woman and the warrior took a walk beyond the camp. The snow glistened under the sun, the air crisp and sharp. He pointed to distant hills, then to her, and then back to the camp, explaining something she did not understand, but the tone was patient, encouraging her to explore the world beyond fear. She nodded, feeling the courage grow inside her. The cold wind no longer seemed as frightening when he was near. She took careful steps, listening to his quiet guidance, absorbing the lessons of observation, patience, and respect for the land. During these walks, they shared small, quiet moments that deepened their connection. He would show her how to identify animal tracks, how to gather herbs for warmth or healing, and how to navigate safely across the snowy terrain. She listened closely, repeating words and mimicking gestures until she understood their meaning. Each small success brought a smile to her face and a rare nod of approval from him. She began to realize that learning his ways was not just about survival. It was about belonging. She was no longer an outsider. She was becoming part of a community that valued cooperation, respect, and care. One evening, while returning from a long walk, a sudden storm swept over the plains. Snow and wind whipped around them, reducing visibility to almost nothing. The woman's heart raced as she stumbled over hidden rocks, fear and panic threatening to overtake her. The warrior was immediately at her side, grasping her hand firmly and guiding her step by step. His presence was steady, his voice calm. Even when the wind tore at their faces, he shielded her with his body, walking slightly ahead and letting her follow his movements. Each step was deliberate, measured, and protective. She felt a mixture of relief and admiration, realizing just how much she relied on him. Not just for survival, but for comfort and reassurance in moments of fear. Once they reached the shelter of the camp, the woman collapsed near the fire, shivering but alive. He handed her a thick fur and gestured for her to sit. She accepted it gratefully, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen body. The storm raged outside, but inside, the fire burned brightly, a symbol of safety and resilience. As she warmed herself, she glanced at the warrior, noticing the exhaustion in his movements. He had spent all day ensuring the safety of the camp, yet he had not faltered in guiding her. The realization brought a deep sense of gratitude. She understood that his care for her was not a simple act of duty. It was a choice, a commitment to protect and support her no matter the challenges. The following days were filled with quiet lessons and growing understanding. The warrior showed her how to prepare simple meals, repair clothing, and tend to small injuries. She began to notice patterns in his behavior, how he spoke with patience to the children, how he helped elders without seeking praise, how he listened before acting. Each observation added to her admiration. She realized that courage was not just in physical strength, but in compassion, humility, and the willingness to face challenges with integrity. One afternoon, while gathering firewood, she accidentally tripped on a hidden root and fell into a shallow stream. The cold water soaked her boots and pants, and she gasped from the shock. The warrior was immediately at her side, pulling her up and wrapping her in a spare fur. He spoke softly, soothing her panic, and guided her back to camp. She shivered, but she laughed softly at herself, feeling embarrassed yet grateful. The warrior smiled faintly, a rare expression that made her heart warm. She realized that moments like these, small, human, and real, were the foundation of trust. They were learning to rely on each other, not out of necessity alone, but out of respect and care. Evenings were often spent by the fire, watching the snow fall gently outside the safety of the camp. The woman found herself opening up, telling fragments of her story, her past life, and her fears. The warrior listened quietly, occasionally nodding, sometimes offering gestures of understanding. Words were limited, but the meaning was clear. She felt seen, understood, and valued. He had saved her life, yes, but he had also given her something even more important, the sense that she mattered. As the days went by, she noticed changes in herself. She walked with more confidence, spoke with more courage, and felt a growing sense of belonging. She no longer feared the wilderness, for she knew she had a protector, a guide, and a friend. The warrior in turn seemed to trust her more, allowing her to perform tasks independently while still offering guidance when necessary. The mutual respect between them became the invisible thread that connected their lives. One quiet evening, she observed the warrior interacting with other members of the camp. He helped a child who had fallen, spoke gently to an elder, and guided newcomers with patience and care. She realized that his strength was not just physical, it was moral, emotional, and deeply rooted in respect for life and people. Watching him, she felt a growing admiration, mixed with a subtle sense of attachment. She was learning to rely on him, yes, but also learning to trust the values he represented. A week later, a minor injury occurred in the camp. A young boy twisted his ankle while running. The warrior immediately tended to him, carefully wrapping the ankle and ensuring the boy was comfortable. The woman watched, noticing the calm precision in his movements. He treated the child with kindness, never rushing, never showing irritation. She understood then that his protection was not limited to her alone. He carried the responsibility of the entire community with a balance of strength and compassion. Over the next few days, she began to feel a quiet sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She joined in daily activities, learned small skills, and shared laughter with others in the camp. The warrior's presence remained constant, a steady anchor in her growing confidence. She realized that she no longer feared the harshness of the world because she had found someone who cared deeply for her safety and well-being. One late afternoon, they walked together toward a distant hill, the snow crunching under their feet. The warrior pointed to the horizon, then to her, then back to the camp. She understood that he was teaching her not just to move through the land, but to feel it, to notice patterns, dangers, and opportunities. The lessons were subtle but powerful. She felt herself growing stronger, not just in body but in spirit. By the end of Part 3, the bond between them had deepened into something more profound than survival. The woman admired his courage, his integrity, and his patience. She felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words, a realization that life had led her to someone who not only saved her life, but also gave her hope, trust, and a place in a community that valued her. She no longer felt like an outsider. She was part of something larger, guided by the quiet strength of a man whose presence was both protective and inspiring. The snow continued to fall outside the camp, but inside there was warmth, trust, and connection. The woman understood that she had survived not only because of the warrior's actions, but also because of the bond that had formed between them, a bond built on care, patience, and mutual respect. And as night fell over the plain, she sat close to the fire, feeling that for the first time in her life she had found safety, belonging, and the beginnings of a deep, meaningful connection with someone who had become more than a savior, someone who was becoming indispensable to her life. The days began to grow longer, and the snow slowly softened under the warmth of early spring. The woman noticed subtle changes in the camp. The ice on the streams melted slightly. The wind became less biting, and the sun lingered a little longer over the horizon. With each passing day, her strength and confidence grew, and she moved through the camp with a sense of belonging she had never known before. The warrior walked beside her, quiet and steady, guiding her gently through tasks while allowing her to take initiative. Their bond had deepened from dependence to mutual trust, and a shared understanding now connected them beyond words. One morning, as the sun painted the horizon in pale gold, the woman found herself helping prepare food for the camp. The warrior had shown her how to knead dough, chop vegetables, and carry baskets without spilling their contents. Each task had once seemed impossible, but now she moved with ease. She glanced at him occasionally, noticing the subtle way he watched over the camp, his gaze alert to any potential danger. He noticed her glances and gave a small nod, acknowledging her progress. That simple gesture filled her with pride and a quiet happiness. She realized that she was not just surviving here. She was learning, growing, and becoming part of something meaningful. Later that afternoon, the warrior asked her to accompany him beyond the camp to check traps he had set earlier. She followed closely, noticing the care he took to avoid dangerous areas and keep her safe. The path was narrow and winding, and the snow still hid potential hazards beneath its soft white cover. At one point, she slipped, catching herself just in time on a tree branch. The warrior's hand was instantly at her elbow, steadying her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice tinged with both relief and gratitude. He nodded without a word, his calm presence more reassuring than any spoken phrase could be. While checking the traps, the woman noticed how methodical and patient he was. He worked carefully, ensuring that each trap was set correctly and that no harm would come to any creature unnecessarily. Watching him, she realized that his sense of responsibility extended far beyond his duties to her alone. He cared deeply for the balance of life, for the community, and for the land itself. In that moment, she admired him not just for his strength, but for his character, his patience, his wisdom, and his unwavering integrity. As they returned to the camp, the woman began to speak more openly. Her words were still broken and uneven, but she felt safe enough to share thoughts and feelings she had long kept hidden. She spoke of her past, her fears, and the loneliness she had endured. The warrior listened quietly, occasionally making small gestures, pointing, nodding, or mimicking her words, to show that he understood. Even without full comprehension, she felt heard. That simple recognition, the knowledge that someone cared enough to listen, filled her with a sense of belonging she had never known before. That evening, a minor crisis occurred in the camp. A sudden gust of wind had knocked over one of the smaller fires, threatening the nearby supplies. The warrior reacted quickly, dousing the flames and ensuring no one was harmed. The woman watched, heart pounding, as he moved with calm precision, protecting both people and property. Once the danger had passed, he gestured for her to help gather scattered items. She stepped forward eagerly, grateful for the chance to contribute. Together they worked efficiently. Side by side, their actions coordinated without words. The teamwork strengthened their bond, reinforcing the unspoken trust between them. Over the next few days, the woman began to notice feelings stirring within herself that she did not fully understand. She admired the warrior's courage and wisdom, yes, but there was something more. A quiet, steady warmth that grew whenever he was near. She caught herself watching him during his work, noticing the way he treated the community with fairness and care. Each small smile, each subtle nod, deepened the respect and affection she felt. She realized that her gratitude was evolving into something more profound, a connection that went beyond simple survival or dependence. One late afternoon, the warrior asked her to join him on a short journey to gather herbs from a nearby grove. The snow had melted just enough to reveal patches of green, and the air carried the faint scent of new growth. As they walked together, he showed her how to identify useful plants, how to pick them without damaging the roots, and how to carry them back to the camp safely. She listened carefully, repeating his gestures and mimicking his movements until she understood. Each successful step brought a sense of accomplishment and pride. She realized that she was no longer a passive observer in this world. She was learning to live within it, guided by someone who cared for her growth as much as her safety. During the journey, they encountered a small group of birds trapped in a snowdrift. The woman gasped, reaching out instinctively to help, but the warrior gently stopped her. Instead, he demonstrated a careful method to free the birds without harming them. She followed his instructions, hands steady now, and together they set the small creatures free. The experience was simple, yet profoundly meaningful. She realized that life in this camp was about respect for others, for nature, and for the delicate balance that sustained everything. And in that moment she understood the depth of the warrior's character. He did not seek glory or recognition, only to live rightly and protect what mattered. Returning to the camp, the woman felt a new sense of confidence. She carried the herbs and helped organize them with care. Guided by the warrior's gentle oversight, the community members watched, acknowledging her efforts with quiet nods. She felt accepted, valued, and part of something larger than herself. Her fear of being alone had faded, replaced by a growing sense of purpose and connection. As evening fell, the woman and the warrior sat by the fire together, the camp quiet around them. She spoke softly, describing her hopes for the future, her dreams of a life where she was no longer lost or afraid. The warrior listened, occasionally offering a gesture or mimicking her words to show understanding. The connection between them had grown stronger, built on shared experience, mutual respect, and quiet companionship. She felt safe in his presence, not just physically, but emotionally. The trust that had begun in fear and need had now become a deep bond, a foundation for something more. Over the next few days, she began to notice changes in her own heart. She looked forward to the moments spent with him, the shared tasks, the quiet walks, and the evenings by the fire. She found herself thinking of him when he was not near, wondering how he fared and hoping he was safe. She realized that the feelings she had once mistaken for gratitude were evolving into something stronger, an admiration that had the quiet weight of affection. Yet she did not speak of these feelings. She watched for signs of his thoughts, searching for gestures, small glances, or subtle changes in expression. Each small sign of care or attention from him sent warmth through her chest. One morning, while helping prepare breakfast, she noticed the warrior pausing to watch her work. His eyes were calm but attentive, observing her every movement. She caught his gaze and smiled softly, and for the first time he returned a full, gentle smile. It was fleeting but meaningful. She felt her heart quicken. The simple exchange without words conveyed trust, admiration, and something deeper, a recognition of each other as companions, not just survivor and protector. Later that day, the warrior invited her to accompany him to a nearby stream to collect water. She followed, moving with quiet confidence, aware of her surroundings and the rhythm of the land. As they walked, she felt a sense of peace she had not experienced in years. The fear and panic that had haunted her during her first days in the wilderness were gone, replaced by a steady trust. She understood that the bond between them was no longer built solely on survival. It was a connection forged through shared experiences, mutual respect, and the understanding that they could rely on each other without hesitation. At the stream, he showed her how to fill containers efficiently and safely, how to avoid the slippery edges, and how to return to camp without spilling. She watched his movements carefully, mimicking them until she felt capable. Each successful attempt brought a sense of accomplishment and pride. She realized that she was learning not just to survive, but to thrive, guided by someone who cared for her growth as much as her safety. As evening fell once more, the woman and the warrior returned to the camp, carrying water and herbs, their tasks complete. They settled by the fire, the community around them quiet and calm. She felt a deep sense of contentment, the kind that comes not just from survival but from belonging, from being seen and valued, and from the quiet acknowledgement that someone cares for you deeply. She realized that her feelings for the warrior had grown beyond gratitude, evolving into admiration, trust, and an unspoken connection that neither words nor gestures could fully capture. The snow outside softened under the moonlight, the air carrying the promise of spring. The woman leaned against the warmth of the fire, wrapped in furs, and watched the warrior quietly tending the flames. She understood that life had given her a rare gift. Not only had she survived the wilderness, but she had also found someone who offered care, guidance, and the beginnings of companionship. She felt a quiet hope that this bond, built on trust, respect, and shared experience, would continue to grow, leading them both toward a future that neither had anticipated but both had earned. By the end of the day, the woman reflected on the journey so far. She had come from fear and uncertainty into a world where she felt valued, protected, and part of a community. She had found strength within herself, guided by the warrior's patient teaching. And in that quiet reflection, she understood the depth of the bond forming between them. A bond that had grown from survival into trust, from trust into respect, and from respect into the first glimmers of a connection that might one day become something more. Spring had fully arrived, and the snow had mostly melted from the plains. The air was warmer, carrying the fresh scent of earth and new growth. Birds chirped in the trees, and small streams gurgled through the camp where the woman had now fully recovered and become an accepted part of the community. Each day brought new routines, small joys, and a deeper sense of belonging. She moved through the camp with confidence, no longer the scared, lost traveler who had stumbled into the warrior's care. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more self-assured, but the bond she shared with the Lakota warrior had grown even more than her independence. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon in soft golden light, the warrior gestured for her to walk beside him. They carried small bundles of herbs and gathered firewood together, moving silently but comfortably side by side. Their steps were in rhythm, each instinctively adjusting to the other's pace. The woman noticed the gentle way he looked at her from time to time, a mixture of admiration, respect, and quiet care. She felt her heart swell with warmth. She realized that the man who had saved her life had become her anchor, her protector, and someone she deeply trusted. That day a group of children ran past them, laughing and playing, their voices echoing across the camp. One stumbled near the edge of the fire pit, but the warrior quickly steadied him. The woman felt a surge of admiration for the way he balanced authority and kindness, protecting others while remaining calm and composed. She had witnessed this many times, and yet each act reminded her of the depth of his character. She was learning that true strength was not in showing power but in showing care, wisdom, and integrity. Later in the afternoon, the warrior led her to a small hill overlooking the camp. He gestured for her to sit beside him, then pointed toward the horizon. The sun reflected off the streams and fields, turning the land golden. He spoke softly, using words she was beginning to understand, and she repeated them carefully, practicing until she felt confident. They shared a quiet moment, simply looking at the beauty of the land around them. The warrior's presence was steady and reassuring, and the woman felt a sense of peace she had never known. Over the next few days, their connection continued to grow. The woman helped with daily chores, prepared meals, gathered water, and repaired clothing. She was no longer simply following instructions. She was making decisions, helping others, and contributing to the life of the camp. The warrior guided her patiently, praising her efforts with small nods and gestures. Each act of encouragement strengthened her confidence and deepened the bond between them. She realized that she was not just surviving. She was thriving in large part because of the care, guidance, and quiet support of the warrior. One evening after the work was done, the woman noticed the warrior watching her quietly as she helped a child with a broken basket. His eyes were calm but focused, observing her movements and her interactions. She felt a strange mix of pride and warmth. She realized that he had come to trust her, just as she had come to rely on him. That realization filled her with a quiet happiness. She was no longer a stranger or a survivor in his eyes. She was part of the community, part of his world.
As night fell, the woman and the warrior sat together by the fire, wrapped in furs.
The camp was quiet, and the stars shone brilliantly overhead. The woman felt a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and growing affection for the man who had saved her life. She reflected on the journey they had shared, the fear, the cold, the trust, and the small moments of care that had formed the foundation of their connection. She realized that her feelings had grown beyond gratitude. She cared deeply for him, and she sensed that he cared for her as well. The following morning, the warrior called her to the edge of the camp, where he had cleared a small area surrounded by stones and fresh earth. He gestured for her to stand beside him. She looked around curiously, sensing that something important was about to happen. He took her hands in his grip firm but gentle. His eyes met hers, steady and full of unspoken meaning. She felt her heart race, sensing the depth of his intention even before words were spoken. With slow, deliberate movements, the warrior presented a simple piece of ceremonial cloth. He gestured for her to hold it, and then, with a small motion, indicated that he was asking her to join him in a lifelong bond. The woman understood. The gestures, the care, the trust, and the shared experiences had led to this moment. She felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear, but from the overwhelming sense of safety, belonging, and love. She nodded, her voice catching in her throat, but her eyes spoke the answer: yes. The warrior then performed a small ceremony in accordance with the traditions of his people. He spoke words of commitment and respect, gestures full of meaning, as the woman followed along with quiet reverence. The community watched, respectful and attentive, acknowledging the importance of this bond. The woman felt a profound sense of inclusion. She was no longer an outsider. She was now a wife, a partner, and an integral part of this community. After the ceremony, they returned to the warmth of the camp, hand in hand. The woman felt a deep sense of joy and gratitude. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led her to a place of love, trust, and safety. She realized that the warrior had not only saved her life, but had also given her the opportunity to live fully, with dignity and purpose. Their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about connection, respect, and the promise of a shared future. In the days that followed, the woman adjusted to her new life as part of the warrior's family. She learned more about the traditions, the ways of the camp, and the responsibilities that came with her role. She worked alongside him and others, contributing to the community and earning the respect of those around her. Each day, the bond between her and the warrior grew stronger, built not only on trust and care but also on shared experiences, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. One afternoon, while they worked together preparing herbs, she looked at the warrior and noticed the way his eyes softened whenever he looked at her. She realized that he too had come to care deeply for her, not just as someone he protected, but as a partner, a companion, and a confidant. The recognition filled her with a warmth that no fire could match. She knew that the connection they shared was rare and precious, the result of trust, respect, and shared growth over many days of challenge and discovery. Evenings became moments of quiet reflection. They would sit together by the fire, watching the stars, sharing simple conversations, and learning more about each other. The words were still limited. Their gestures, glances, and actions conveyed a depth of understanding that needed no explanation. The woman felt safe, valued, and cherished. She had not only survived but had found a place where she belonged, alongside someone who had become essential to her life. As spring deepened, the camp came alive with activity. Children laughed, elders shared stories, and the community worked together to prepare for the warmer months. The woman moved confidently among them, offering help, guidance, and care where she could. The warrior remained by her side, proud and attentive, their partnership visible to all. The bond they had formed through survival, trust, and mutual respect had blossomed into a deep, enduring connection. One evening, after a long day of work, they stood together on a small hill overlooking the camp. The sun set in soft shades of pink and gold, casting long shadows across the plains. The woman looked at the warrior, feeling the depth of her emotions. She realized that the journey that had begun with fear, cold, and uncertainty had led to trust, belonging, and love. She was no longer the frightened traveler. She was a partner, a wife, and a member of a community that valued her. The warrior turned to her, his gaze steady and full of meaning. He reached for her hand, holding it gently, and she felt a wave of warmth and security. No words were needed. They had shared too much, experienced too much together. Their bond was undeniable, built on trust, care, and the promise of a shared life. The woman understood that she had found more than safety. She had found a lifelong companion, someone who would walk beside her through every challenge and joy that lay ahead. As night fell over the plains, the woman and the warrior returned to the camp. The firelight reflected in their eyes as they moved through the quiet village, hand in hand. The community watched respectfully, acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. The woman felt a profound sense of peace. She was home, not just in the camp, but in the heart of the warrior who had saved her and shown her what it meant to belong. In the quiet moments that followed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had begun with fear, desperation, and uncertainty, but through the care, patience, and guidance of the warrior, she had discovered strength, trust, and love. She understood that life could be harsh and unpredictable, but she also realized that connection, compassion, and courage could transform even the most difficult circumstances into something beautiful. The warrior and the woman sat together by the fire that night, watching the stars above the plains. She leaned slightly against him, feeling his warmth and steady presence. He did not speak, and she did not need words. The trust, care, and love between them were evident in every gesture, every glance, and every shared moment. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, side by side. The snow of winter had melted and spring had arrived in full. Life in the camp moved forward with a sense of purpose, community, and hope. The woman had found safety, belonging, and a companion who valued her as much as she valued him. Their bond was a testament to resilience, trust, and the transformative power of care. In the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the plains, they had found not just survival but a shared life, filled with respect, connection, and the promise of a future together.